Thousands of people are moving to Nashville, Music City, USA. My next guest can tell you everything you ever wondered about Nashville, its politics, past, present, and hopefully not future. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Conversations is the show where I get to talk about anything and everything that's on my mind. Since I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I ran for mayor twice, Nashville is always on my mind. My guest today is Michael Bishop. Michael is the author of a book that everyone should read. And whether or not you're native to Nashville or you just moved here, you're thinking about moving to Nashville, you need to read this book because it has implications for what is taking place today in Nashville. Some things never change. And so the title of Michael's book is A Murder in Music City: Corruption, Scandal, and the Framing of an Innocent Man. So, Michael, welcome to Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain.
Thank you, Dr. Swain. It's great to be back on the program, have a conversation with you. It's been a while, so this is a good thing. I was just listening to your opening statement, and I believe I heard some words about so many people moving to Nashville, Tennessee at this point. Last I heard, it was over 100 a day coming from all over the country. And I guess I would say a lot of those folks are, I'm certain, excited about their future, hopeful, looking forward to a better place to live than maybe where they were coming from. The only thing I would say about that is sometimes it's good to know the history of where you're going, either before you get there or just soon after. So Nashville has a history.
And you know, that 100 a day you mentioned, that's been going on, for the last 5 or 6 years? And so yes. There are hundreds of thousands of people that have moved. If they didn't move to Nashville, they moved to one of the other cities that are nearby. They're moving to Tennessee, but many of them are making Nashville their home.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's, I guess we're still the healthcare mecca. A lot of new jobs. Hopefully we get past the coronavirus pandemic, that problem. Then I think a lot of those folks are coming here for great reasons. Hopefully they're coming. Some are raising families. But the interesting thing, and I appreciate you mentioning the book, A Murder in Music City. I had no knowledge of Nashville's history when I started down almost a 20-year path researching one cold case. I mean, I shouldn't call it a cold case. It was a case where the wrong man went to prison for something he didn't do. And as I started working through the research, I started finding out basically, and I would put it like this, basically, you find the people who, once they get in power, they'll do just about anything to keep that power. And sometimes
we see that every day.
Yes, ma'am. And sometimes, Dr. Swain, the people who are on the other end of that, they might have a good outcome, but in some cases they're not. So it's an interesting story. I hope maybe your viewers will get a chance to go through that. It was certainly a learning journey for me about the city and some of the powers that have run this city for many, many years.
Yes, and one of the things, you started investigating what was not a cold case, but someone had gone to prison. What made you question the conviction of the person that was serving time?
A number of things. When I started looking behind the scene, and it was, I guess I would describe it as the power of the press to tell one story. And then when I got behind that curtain, if you will, I started finding out what the real facts were. And it was a combination of the power of the press with the power of the politicians. And they wanted to present a story, which actually was a falsehood, a lie, really. And they wanted to keep that story going. But once I started seeing what the true facts were behind the case, and that those facts had never been reported, it put me in a position where I really had to question everything. And I was meeting with some of the citizens in Nashville who lived through the period that I'm describing was in the early 60s, mid 1960s. And I would meet with citizens who lived in Nashville, knew what was going on. A young woman had been murdered in one of the satellite communities, the Creve Hall area. And when I met with the people who actually lived in the Creve Hall area, they were telling me what we saw, what we experienced,
Right.
what we heard was not what was reported in the newspaper. So it was it was very unsettling. I was disappointed. I hope that's not the type of thing that can happen anymore. Maybe because of the internet, social media, we could stop that. But those two entities working together, the press and the political power, they created a very bad outcome for a number of people.
But Michael, when you say you hope that couldn't happen today, we see all the time that the press presents a very different narrative than the facts on the ground by everyone that was there that witnessed particular things happen.
I would agree with what you're saying. I'm often hear myself saying, I'm not sure those people are the press. maybe they work for somebody else. I don't view them in some cases as what I would describe as traditional reporting or investigative journalism. So, but I do agree. You certainly hear things that don't seem correct.
And Michael, I feel like I have become so cynical because, at one time I believe, that New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, that, these were the top newspapers and you could always go to the bank with whatever they published. And I don't know if the journalism field changed, or if politics had become so ingrained, if the government captured the media. But it seems to me that we almost have no trustworthy sources of news.
I'll share the cynicism. It's kind of a disappointing reality, I think, at this point in time. I'm hoping over time there's, I guess, a drive or a need for real, authentic information that someone will step in and fill those voids. I'm not sure I'm describing that correctly, but I'm hopeful that will slowly, maybe we can get back to a time where we had that type of access. I'm not sure. I think it's easy to get access to information now, but sometimes that ease doesn't always give you the real facts in a particular case or a matter.
Right, right. I think so. So, just going back to your research, I know your book was published in 2017.
Correct.
When did you start the research? And you're not a native of Franklin where you live, right?
I'm not. In fact, I arrived in Nashville, I think it was spring of 1983. It was kind of a long, winding journey, and one that I know you can probably relate to. I grew up in North Alabama. My grandparents were sharecroppers, never owned a
You're
home.
kidding. I didn't
I'm
know
not
that.
kidding. Never owned a home, never had a car. All they did was farm. And the sharecropping system is, we could have a whole story about that one. But they had a bunch of children, and my dad was one of the children they had. Neither of my parents graduated high school.
Well, let me stop you,
Yes,
Michael.
ma'am.
With that profile, you're supposed to be black.
Probably so. That's the irony, I guess. That's probably true. But that's one of those things where maybe history and reporting leaves out the fact there are a lot of poor white sharecroppers growing up in Alabama back in the 1900s, and that's where my family came from. My parents never finished high school, didn't get close, but what they had, and it was, I guess, a drive inside of them. They had a love of learning. So when I was growing up on a small farm in Alabama, my 93-year-old mother is still around, living there. I grew up with access to books, and my parents made certain that we had access to books in our family. So I grew up with a love of learning. That's basically what I've been doing most of my life, is in the learning industry. And That was the background that got me into coming to Nashville. Came to move first to Franklin back in 1983, 84, in that range.
Okay, well, we're going to take a break. And
Okay,
so
sure.
after this word from our sponsor, I want you to continue with your story and we're going to dig into the book.
Got it.
So
Thank you,
I'll
Dr.
be back after this word from our sponsor.
Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain is made possible by Cooper Steel, a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee.
Cooper Steel believes in sponsoring Carol Swain because we believe as she does, you build strong, you stand strong.
What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel is committed to excellence, responsibility, and community. Cooper Steel's motto is, build strong, stand strong. They treat their employees and customers like family. Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Learn more about our generous sponsor at coopersteel.com. Black Eye for America is enlightening the nation.
I would definitely encourage people to buy the book to learn a little bit more about what critical race theory is actually rooted in, Marxism.
Buy the book at bethepeoplenews.com or wherever books are sold.
Just so we can have logical and practical conversations with people who are getting misinformation and disinformation from social media, from their friends.
Now an Amazon bestseller and available on Kindle.
Absolutely. It's a must-read book.
I'm back with my guest, Michael Bishop. And Michael, the research that you started on this book, A Murder in Music City, it involved you talking with detectives and talking with people that wondered what you were up to.
Yes. There were plenty of people who wondered what I was up to. And I was very careful, I guess is the right way to put it. I really said to people, can you help me? I'm just trying to understand, just want to know a little more about the topic. Maybe you, the person I would be interviewing, maybe you can help me with what you remember. But I did a really good job of telling as few people as possible what I was up to, just to make sure they weren't hiding information from me or trying to put obstacles in my way. And once I got to a point where I knew what the truth was, it was kind of a race to get the information into the public venue to get a manuscript published. But I really started out with no plans to write a book. I started out with no plan to write a manuscript. I thought I was doing what needed to be done, which was the right thing for an 18-year-old murder victim. And the research, it was easy to be obsessed with it because almost every turn, anytime I found new information, it was completely at odds with what had been presented as the true information. But it was quite the journey.
Your bio says in 1997, you accidentally discovered a hidden file in Nashville's Metro archives that contained information about the babysitter. And so how do you accidentally find a hidden file?
It's a great question, and thank you for getting me on track here. I had a friend who is a native Nashvilleian, and he asked me to help do research on he called them the top 40 stories in Nashville's history. A lot of those top 40 stories are not great stories, and they don't have a lot of happy endings in them. They're plane crashes, murders. It's quite a...
Michael, now we have new ones.
Yes, we do. Sadly, we do have some new ones, and some of those are not great either. I ended up making a visit to what was then known and still is known as the Metro Archives. And you may remember Mayor Dick Fulton at one point. One of the good things he did was he helped fund a metropolitan location for Nashville's archives. And those files went in the archives. I walked in cold one day in August in 1997, asked if there was any information that might help me with my 40 Stories project. And the woman who helped me said, "We just got all the files in from the first chief of police. Would you like to look through those? We haven't looked through them. Would you like to look through them?" And I'm thinking, in what world could this ever happen? And they handed me those files. And I went to, I think I was in box number 3. And I pulled out a folder, and it was the file that the chief of police had kept. And it was photographs, statements, witness statements, enough information to make me think he kept this for a reason, because it certainly doesn't match what was reported as having gone on in the home there in Creve Hall. So that's how I began from that very start.
So, I mean, if he had been, you know, far thinking, that's not a good way to express it, but if he had been, you know, looking to the future, he wouldn't have kept all that information that didn't match the media reports.
I agree. In fact, it seems like what he was doing was he was holding on to information just in case there was not an arrest or an indictment. And
Okay, I see.
because I think he had a backup plan, and that backup plan, I don't want to spoil too much for people who might read the book, but that
Right.
backup plan ended up going in a totally different direction. So to put it in a nutshell, the arrest and indictment of a judge's son for having murdered an 18-year-old in her home in Creve Hall on a Saturday night, February 1964, that conviction ultimately ends up being corrupt. And the small group of very powerful insiders were actually involved in making sure the true culprits in the murder never were brought to justice. And again, I don't want to spoil too much.
Right,
but
I understand. And I can tell the viewers that one of the things I really loved about your book is that there are certain the streets you can go in. You can go to Creve Hall and find the house, you know, where the murder took place. And many people in Brentwood, they know Ray Little's, you know, garage, and
Sure.
that still, you know, was mentioned back then. And so Ray Little is the mayor of Brentwood now. And so a lot of these people, David Browley, who was the
Oh, sure.
mayor of Nashville up until Cooper. I mean, it was his great grandfather. And some of the things that I got from the book was the fact that metropolitan Nashville was birthed in corruption. And I would argue that that corruption still exists today.
Nashville, and it's a great way to put it. I think Nashville, maybe like a lot of other cities, you could probably count Memphis in that group. You could count Chicago, but to keep power required doing things that were illegal, doing things that were immoral, certainly. And it was all done. A lot of it was done in such a quiet way. The insiders knew what was going on. But I think it was Life magazine at one point said of Nashville, Tennessee, this is the most corrupt city in America. And I know that just sounds so foreign, I'm sure, to people.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Well, that could be. There's, let's see, Printer's Alley. So there'll be a lot of people moving here who have no clue what Printer's Alley means, or where to find it, or what's changing in Printer's Alley. But back in the day, you could get anything you wanted in Printer's Alley. And when I say anything, I mean mostly anything immoral or illegal. And that's from gambling to sex to whatever you wanted. You could find it in Printer's Alley. So I do hope people get a chance to read the book. But that's a great point. You know, the more things change, there are new ways to stay the same.
And I actually read an article maybe a year or so ago, and I don't remember the details, but apparently with Nashville being the booming city and all of the activity downtown, is that they do, you know, you can still get what you want in Nashville, and businessmen coming in for a day, you know, they can hook up and it's easy. They have a system in place where we are able to bring people in for business, and they're able to take care of their immoral activities on the side before they go home. And
I can't say that I'm surprised to hear that. I can also confidently say I have no knowledge of it personally because I don't. Wow. That
no,
doesn't
it's just
surprise
our
me.
city.
Yeah.
Our city, it caters to a certain type of um, set of activities in many ways.
I was always struck during the research I was doing. I was always struck with the two things that didn't really seem to go together, and that was on one hand you have a town back in the day that was described as there's a church on every corner. Nashville was the buckle of the Bible Belt. That was another
Mhm.
description. But then on the other hand, the city is being described as the most corrupt city in America. So I just, and I can tell you because I know through some churches where I've worshiped and worked with, the outcome of that turns out to be a lot of addictions, a lot of personal
Right.
problems. I know that's a whole different show or segment, but at one time, Nashville became, I think it was the sex addiction rehab capital in America. People were coming to Nashville quietly to
Right.
Middle Tennessee for those types of problems. So problems begat problems. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm running too long talking.
Well, we're going to take a break, and when we return, I want to talk a little bit about just some of the things that you encountered, and that'll be our last section. And so we would want to really pitch your book because I think everyone should read that book.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment.
Dr. Carol Swain's Be the People, a call to reclaim America's faith and promise, newly released in paperback and audio with a new introduction, is a challenge to all Americans. If you are serious about being the best citizen you can be, this is the book for you. From addressing moral relativism to reclaiming the future, you'll understand why Dr. Swain is one of the most relevant voices in today's culture war. Are you ready to reclaim America's faith and promise? Purchase at bethepeoplenews.com/books or wherever books are sold. Cooper Steel is a family-owned business that provides the steel fabrications for some of the greatest buildings across the United States. 60 years ago, Kenneth and Faye Cooper founded their company in Shelbyville, Tennessee. What started as a vision and now a nationally recognized and operated company that remains true to its founders' Judeo-Christian values and principles. Cooper Steel's motto is, "Build strong, stand strong." Thank you to Cooper Steel for standing strong with Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain.
I'm back with Michael Bishop. Michael, I know that at some point officials became aware that someone was poking around in that murder case, and you had some fear, and you also had some potential witnesses that weren't so cooperative.
I did. And I've had, I don't know how many books and talks, I'm sorry, I don't know how many book club events I've had or talks with judges, just a number of groups where I've spoken many times. And usually the question is, were you ever afraid? And I always answer, well, I was afraid probably at least twice. I was afraid my wife was going to murder me if I didn't stop being so obsessed with the research. And then, but for real, I was at Jimmy Kelly's. It's an old restaurant in Nashville.
I know Jimmy Kelly's.
Jimmy Kelly's. I had dinner there one night, and I was having dinner with an investigator who was around during the 1960 timing of this particular murder. And he asked me straight up, he said, one of my friends wants to know if you are reinvestigating a murder or if you're just doing some research on a murder. And I knew who the friend was. The friend was an old detective who had worked on the case, a real insider. And I'm sure my face went white when, I mean, literally, I was just sitting, looking out, staring out the window, trying to think what's the best answer here. And I said, oh, just doing some research. And, but I left that meeting and told a close friend of mine, if something happens to me, you'll know exactly why, because I got too close to what some insiders wanted to cover up. The other thing that happened during this research, I ended up visiting people who were elderly. They had made their way into nursing homes, in some cases, quite lucid, with great memories of, and I should say great memories, I mean detailed memories, as if all of this had happened the day before. A lot of those people, most of them were very uncomfortable because they knew the old Nashville. They knew what it meant to be, I guess, sharing too much information.
Right.
And some of those people, however, near the end, they were willing to, I guess, share with me what they knew, because I had expressed to them, you're about to run out of time.
Right.
If you want to pass on something that's helpful, now is the time to do it. And that's part of what happened as well.
Now, Michael, as a person who's ran for mayor of Nashville, I had people who wanted to support me, or they said, but they were fearful of retaliation. And so there was a lot of fear taking place there. And then I ran as a anti-corruption candidate, and I had so many people saying, I'm so afraid they'll hurt you. Why did you tell them that you were going to go after the corruption? And so that was what I experienced in 2018 and 2019, was that there was a machine, and there were people in government that came forward to tell me about kickbacks and various things that were taking place in metro government. But there was a fear factor. And even some of the people we sent to the federal marshals, there's no evidence anything ever happened.
Wow. That's sad to hear. And I'm sorry about the experience that you had with that. But I can certainly say I met a number of people who worked in metro government back in that period of time, 60s, 70s. And part of what they described was just a system of corruption, a system of kickbacks. And you really were basically out of the loop if you didn't go along. And I hate to hear that was happening as recently as 2018 and 19, but there's a lot of money that flows through a metro government, all the satellite cities. It's disheartening to hear, but it certainly does still happen at this point.
And it's even more money because of COVID. I mean,
Yes.
They've been rolling in dough, and that's one reason why I believe there was such a long lockdown, shutdown, half opening of Nashville.
Yep.
That's ended.
I agree. I think in part, I don't have firsthand knowledge, but it sure looked like the more it was shut down, it was because the hope was there would be more of the payoff later. More funds would be coming from federal taxpayers, state taxpayers doing that. It's very unusual. I hope we never have to experience it again.
And Michael, I want to get back to your book, A Murder in Music City. I understand that you can just tell us how people have reacted to this story and the death of this babysitter.
Probably the most notable reaction came from one of those old detectives who was searching for me after the book had been released. And I was getting phone calls from the library, from the archives people saying, there's a detective looking for you. And I'm thinking, well, I knew this was going to happen at some point. I might as well just call, see what he wants. So I found him and told him who I was, told him that I understood he was looking for me. And I didn't know what I could do to help him, but he said the reason he was looking for me was to tell me that what I had written was true.
Good.
And I thought, well, that's
wonderful.
That's an unusual response, but I'll never forget that. I don't think I've been to a book club meeting or a talk or a speech in any venue that I didn't get confirmation that there was not only these types of things had gone on, but there was more than that. And I don't know how many times I've been asked, will you please explore this? Will you please go investigate this? Will you please do the research for this? And my response typically has been, I can't do another 20-year research project, but I can point you to maybe some people who can help you. But it's been it's been an incredible journey. I'm thankful to be, I feel like I played a part in getting the true story out for Paula Herring. That was the girl's name. We've actually created a scholarship fund through the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. I don't collect money. I don't disperse the money. But just this past month in May, we delivered the third scholarship in Paula Herring's name for the community.
Well, Michael, that is a wonderful outcome for that young woman's life and her memory. And I commend, journalists like you who are willing to risk everything, for the good of our society. Can you, for justice, and for those that can't speak for themselves, could you very quickly tell our viewers how they can get in contact with you?
Absolutely. The easiest way is there's a Facebook page for, I think I put it up here. There's a Facebook page for A Murder in Music City. And there's messages on there. You can easily send a message there. I'll pick those up. The book can be acquired at Parnassus, one of the best independent bookstores in the country, and that's in Nashville. You can get it in Columbia, Tennessee, through Duck River Books. You can go on Amazon, and you can get the Kindle version, the paperback version, the audio version. So
yes,
pretty much anywhere.
Did you read the audio version?
No, I actually wanted to, but I guess the owner of the company found a true professional in the Northwest of the United States, and he was the one who read the story. I was certainly willing to.
Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to spending more time with you and getting your insights about present day Nashville the next time we meet.
Thank you, Dr. Swain. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Many ask, why should I care about critical race theory? I'm Dr. Carol Swain, and along with Dr. Christopher Shore, we've authored a new book, Black Eye for America, How Critical Race Theory is Burning Down the House. Every American should care about CRT because this radical Marxist philosophy is dividing our country and torture our children, but we're going to stop it. Endorsed by Dr. Ben Carson, Black Eye for America is a playbook on combating CRT.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Conversations. I strongly urge each of you to get a copy of Michael Bishop's book, A Murder in Music City. Anyone who wants to understand contemporary Nashville, you need to know part of the history. And so that book just lays it out in a very graphic way. It's something that I think that it should be read by people who are thinking about moving to Nashville, as well as people who are natives. Be sure to share the information about this show, and I look forward to seeing you next week.